Good morning, good afternoon. Hello, folks. Welcome to another instance of Kadena Campfire. Today we have an awesome roster of Kadenians with us. We have Emily Pillmore and Will as well. So really excited to have her on the stream. Hello, Emily. Hello, Will.
Hello.
Hey, Tyler. It's been a while. How are you?
Pretty well. I'm pretty stoked that we have ETH Denver coming up here in a couple days, where I'll be traveling later today and see a bunch of the Kadena folks, and pretty stoked to say hello to the community as well. So we'll try and make these very interactive. Oh, we have an update on how StreamYard shows comments. That's cool. So yeah, everyone that is here with us today on YouTube, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, wherever you may be attending from, please feel free to chime in the conversation, ask questions. Would love to hear from you. Welcome, Ryan. Happy to have any first timers here and old Vanguard as well. So the way we're going to format today's campfire is we're going to start off by discussing a recent news story as we've done in the past, and then we'll go into some Q&A that we've had asked on Discord, on Twitter, and of course any live questions that come in. So just a great chance for us to all talk with community and for community to talk back and have conversation with each other. And we'll try and make this interactive and fun and make sure that everyone's questions get answered here. So first of all, there's been some crypto news of Coinbase announcing Base, a new layer 2 network on Ethereum. So for those that didn't hear, Base is an Ethereum layer 2 network that offers a secure and low-cost, developer-friendly way for anyone to build decentralized apps or dApps on-chain, according to Coinbase. And they also announced the Base Ecosystem Fund, which will invest in early-stage projects building on Base that meet some investment criteria, with no new token being offered. So very curious for both Will and Emily, what's your take on this announcement and this news?
I mean, it makes sense. The offshored exchanges, like, I'm pretty sure that, Binance is Binance Chain. I'm pretty sure most of the other ones do as well. They have their own, layer 2s that you can just go and issue tokens on. But that's going to be I'm really curious because Coinbase is publicly traded, unless I'm mistaken. And that means that they need to get approval for stuff. Like Coinbase Lend had issues. Or Coinbase, it was Coinbase Lend, I think, was their lending program, the SEC next. So I'm really curious about how that conversation is going to go, because they're going to basically be running a environment wherein people can go and do ICOs for random tokens. And I'm just curious, if it actually gets approved, if it was approved, and if it's something that is actually going to roll with the current SEC's outlook on stuff. That's outside of that. I mean, it's a cool idea, and I get why they're doing it on Ethereum. You can just copy and paste stuff over because it's going to be mostly just token stuff that's going on in there, or maybe some NFT stuff too. So it would also be interesting to see if you automatically get listed if you launch on top of Base on Coinbase. That's actually probably what I'm more curious. Well, no, between that and the SEC.
Yeah, so a lot to think about there in terms of both how does this influence access to capital markets via Coinbase, which is one of the preeminent exchanges and opportunities for US-based investors to access crypto via fiat. And then secondly, how does it intersect with SEC and with regulations? And what does this mean in terms of Coinbase being a publicly traded entity and having regulatory purview by the SEC now running a layer 2 that may interface with more of crypto? And how does that inform the SEC's ability to enact regulation? I think both really, really interesting points. Emily, any thoughts or reactions from you?
Sketchy. I don't know. I have a lot of questions about it. It seems a little bit weird for a centralized exchange to start getting into the layer 2 game and then preferring one of its major partners, or at least one of its major listings. And it's going to be a regulatory nightmare, I think. We'll see. I don't know too much about this stuff, but Will is definitely the expert in the room.
Yeah, another interesting reaction from the chat from One Hit Quitta. ETH has scaling issues, so it needs layer 2s like Base and Matic to stay relevant. Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, especially even with the proof of stake transition. The layer 1 has not seen scaling benefits from that yet. And so the layer 2 is very much the path forward on Ethereum at the moment. So yeah, that's an interesting point. Thanks for chiming in. All right. So with that discussion, we're going to give some brief Kadena updates from both the kind of Kadena Eco, biz dev side, as well as from more of the core Kadena and Pact side. And so in particular, I'll start off on the BD side. So we're continuously working to bring more grantees to the fold. Excited to at least hint that next week there will be a new grantee that's announced that I think will be quite impactful and interesting for the community at large. So stay tuned for that. We'll have that announcement rolling out here in the upcoming week or so. Secondly, I want to give a very brief update, or rather a callback to the tutorial that we started with Thomas Honeyman the past week in terms of diving in more with real world Pact. And we went through the Faucet contract and went through Goliath wallet. And coming up in the near future, we will schedule a follow-up live tutorial going through Chakra, which is a lending platform that's been built with Pact on Kadena. It's super well commented, and that'll be a wonderful launching off point for more intermediate Pact developers. So stay tuned for that, and we'll be sure to keep you updated with the latest there. And then finally, there's an exclusive builder call out in regards to Kadena.js. You can find it on Twitter. So for developers, all you need to do is basically submit your GitHub repo, and you can potentially get access to some new upcoming things a bit early. So that's a great opportunity for anyone here that's with us on the Campfire community call. That's a developer that has an active GitHub. Definitely make sure to check that out on Twitter. And now I will pass it over to Emily for other updates that relate to Kadena.js and Pact.
Yeah, so recently we made some strides in what we're going to frame for the delivery window for Pact Core. As most of you know, I've sort of been dropping hints along the way, and we've done things very sort of publicly with our announcements and updates for this stuff. There is going to be a kind of Pact V2 coming down the pipeline, and we've scoped it for binaries in the next 9 weeks. So basically 3 weeks of building out and coming to parity with the current Pact in terms of its feature set and syntax and that kind of thing. And then another 3 weeks in terms of integration with nodes, another 3 to write the initial documentation and sort of get all the integrations we want together. And we plan on shipping it within that time frame. Binaries, LSP, IDE support for it, and documentation. And most, if not all, of your programs should be backwards compatible, minus a few small deprecations and wibbles.
Emily, what's LSP mean?
Language Server Protocol. It means, or it's a particular standardized protocol for interacting in sort of like in an IDE, reporting things and sort of like a means of getting all the nice features that you would want out of a development environment in a nice sort of compatible way with a bunch of different IDEs, or basically anyone that supports it can have the nice experience. So it's a translatable experience across a bunch of different platforms. So we plan on getting people involved with this as early as possible because we want the community kicking tires as quickly as we can. But also because it's going to be a market improvement over the current sort of experience in many different ways, namely for tooling authors. So we plan on shipping, for instance, with a grammar, and we plan on shipping with the ability to sort of introspect on the internal processes of a Pact program. So optimization becomes easier, building tools for Pact becomes easier, and we can really open up the language and its ecosystem to the rest of everyone else. And hopefully provide a bunch of opportunities for you guys to, make the language what you want and get the features that you want to see without us having to be the ones to sort of, get poked by everyone and say, hey, we want this. Like, you guys can actually just take control of it. So, and this is one step in a long line of steps towards sort of bringing the community more on board with the language and getting more involved. Down the pipeline, say 6 months to a year, we plan on having things like DAOs for features, and this is all part of the plan. So we're moving towards a more open model and more sound internal implementation. So we're stoked.
Perfect. And then final quick update I'll give is that a number of folks on the Kadena team will be at ETH Denver. Some I think are already there as of this morning, and many of us will be there either later today or tomorrow. So anyone in the community that's around during ETH Denver, feel free to please come up and say hello, and would love to see you and make some community in person. So that would be absolutely wonderful. Now we're going to switch over to the live Q&A portion of our campfire. So we have some questions that have already been asked on Discord and Twitter that we'll get to. And then, of course, we're going to take live questions from the community. So please feel free to post questions on Discord, YouTube, Twitter, Telegram, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. So first question we'll take, this is a question from Jad, I believe, from Discord. Will gas limits on blocks be raised anytime in the future, or are they pretty much locked in? As it stands, only about 40 coin transactions can be completed in a block, and more complex transactions are even fewer. It's not an issue right now with low daily transactions, but as the ecosystem grows, I can see this being a large issue, even spread across the chains. Emily or Will, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, I know the answer to this one. We're planning on scoping it for the next release. We can bump the gas limit at any time, basically, is the answer to the question. And it's demand driven. And as we're seeing demand sort of increase across the network, we do plan on raising the gas limit as needed. And next release will feature an increase in gas. So.
Yeah. And adding some more color to Emily's answer, that's more the function of what's coming up next. So there's this balance that there is in proof of work, which is that you can't have too much going on in a block such that it affects the amount of time it takes to validate a block before you start to mine it in kind of a meaningful way, because you need to execute all the transactions before you can actually get to mining. And there's a ratio at which, let's say half the time is spent executing transactions, then all of a sudden the miner calculus for what blocks you're going to mine and how you build blocks changes pretty fundamentally. And one of the goals of Kadena is to have low gas fees long term, basically forever, because we can also add more chains and scale up. But if we were to say that, if we were to 10x the gas limit or 100x the gas limit and put it at, let's say, 15 seconds to be able to execute a block instead of the current, I think it's 2 to 5, I think it went to 1 to 5 seconds, then that's how much gas you can process. Then you end up with the gas being the only way that a miner would actually mine a block that is full at that point, that takes 15 or 30 seconds, would be that the gas would need to, in fees, be paying what the miner is missing out on by that extra time that they would have to mine. So you'd actually have an increase in gas costs across the network if you were to increase it too much, because we've designed the network such that the mining reward should be long-term sustainable, and gas is more for DOS protection and things like that. The other balance here is that as Pax increases in performance, which we definitely have a long-term eye on with new backends and other things, that as that takes place, then you can actually fit more into the same amount of time. And once you can do that, then you can increase the gas limit, because the amount of time that you're allocating for a block to be produced and mined, that execution step, you can get more done at the same amount of time. But as for the near-term stuff, Emily's totally got it.
Perfect. Thank you both. Next question from Fudo. Could we get a similar live demonstration of QuickSign? I know it is a new feature, so I don't know how many people know how to use it. Someone like Thomas Honeyman, Emily, or Doug could show off how it works, or what was used to test it to know it works. Would love to see a deep dive into the code and to see it in action. Fudo, thank you so much for the suggestion. I'm going to sort of leave that to the team offline to sort out, but we got 2 thumbs up from Emily, so that's a good sign.
That's a good idea.
I think it's a great idea, and thanks for the suggestion.
Yeah, I also think Doug would totally be down to show it all, because it is cool.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds like we have consensus. All right. Well, we're going to make that happen, Fudo. Thank you for that. That's a really good suggestion for some technical content. And yeah, community, please keep the suggestions coming. We definitely know that there are many in this community that have their finger on the pulse of crypto and marketing, and have a good sense and intuition for what might be good content. And we definitely benefit from wonderful suggestions like this. So please keep it up. All right, we have a question from Shakda. During the recent KD Talks AMA with Will and Emily, The point was raised about making Kadena and Pact both simple to program but equally important, intuitive and fun to work with. What steps can be taken to make this a priority, and how?
So there's some context there. So, Kadena is the core protocol. It's the node, that is running this whole thing. And that one needs to be like safety first, 100% there. And that we need to have massive testing. So making that easy to work with, to actually be able to go and put in pull requests for upgrades to the decentralized network, that I wouldn't say should be it should be intuitive, but it's still we need to be way more careful with that, which is what we brought up of, we don't want someone to be able to put in a pull request that accidentally undermines the system and introduces a bug. And then all of a sudden, we have, the house on fire and we have to go figure out what to do and go fix it. On the Pact side, I'll leave it to Emily, but I kind of already think it's there.
Yeah, I think so. Just reading into this question, this is somebody who probably uses Pact or is getting started with Pact. Pact as a language is fantastic. But when people say things like intuitive and fun, I don't think they're actually talking about the language. I think they're talking about tooling, mainly. Because what makes a language fun is sort of the dialogue that you get when programming and sort of the feedback mechanisms and, having all the information you need in order to express yourself properly in code form and sort of express your intent as close to your sort of brain idea as possible. And currently, Pact isn't quite there, which, we have IDE experiences like Atom, right? So you can get a lot of that good IDE experience in the form of traces and various kinds of REPL interactions. But I think what would really take Pact to the next level and actually make it genuinely fun would be to improve the IDE experience, improve the error feedback experience. So, better errors, better or more suggestive errors, sort of better integrations with more, tools that people want to use. So things like VS Code, for example, we have VS Code support. And then I think the next step after that is integration with the blockchain. So it's fun to write the program. It's even more fun to see it run. And currently, the only means of interacting with the blockchain is either through a wallet like Chainweaver or through various curl commands, which is a little bit janky to some degree. But we want people to be able to spin up their own sort of mainnet environment, test things locally and, get good feedback and incorporate that into their program and go back to their IDE and say, okay, I need to do X, Y, Z. And I see a future for Pact where people can sit down with a kind of easy to spin up node and an IDE, and they can just easily integrate their ideas in code form, throw them on the blockchain, get the feedback that they need, keep coding and so on and so forth, and just develop this nice feedback loop of in prod type simulation and then feedback and then code and then errors and then, once those are fixed, back to the blockchain and that kind of thing. And we have some ideas coming down the pipeline for this. So the Pact v2 stuff is going to be a good step forward in terms of errors and I think sort of IDE experience and general sort of user interaction with the language. But user interaction with the blockchain is one that we're still planning out. And we do have some things, and I can't talk about them, but we are planning on working in a setting where users can sort of code to a backend, right? And have that kind of meaningful feedback with their smart contracts in a local sense. So there's a lot we can do here, and there's a lot we're working on. And I would say hang out for 6 months and see where we are. That's what hang out till summer and see where we are, because we might have a lot of progress in that area.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point, Emily, that Pact itself, I find the development experience amazing, but when I'm doing things very locally, like the whole I code up part of a contract. I then go and add things to the REPL script. And then every time I hit save, it reruns this so that I can exercise the code and see what it's doing. But also then I get unit tests automatically out of it. That's fantastic. But the interaction, like the developer experience for actually putting things on a chain and doing the other stuff that you need to use Pact, which is, building your front end, really just building your front end and getting it to interact with the back end. That is what we've been working on for really the past year with Kadena JS. And it's already advanced by leaps and bounds, but there's still work to be done on it. And also getting that local development experience where you can actually have locally the global state of the blockchain as of some time, and then code against it and then see how things react, as opposed to having to kind of build up this artificial environment in your REPL scripts and just being like pulling things in and importing them. That is going to be a massive advancement too.
Awesome. See some pretty interesting questions that have been coming in on the live chats. So we'll take a question from Loyal Excel. Hey, Kadena recruited many new people last year. Are there still any crucial roles that need to be filled?
To my knowledge, we're still very actively seeking a CMO, and really just want to kind of revamp the marketing team and put it under kind of like strategic leadership. I know that the developer experience team, Randy's team, which is doing all the front end stuff, is back to expanding again. I believe that like community manager is somewhere in the pipeline. I know I mentioned this at the last AMA, but I haven't actually followed up. Outside of that, Emily, do you know of any other kind of critical ones?
Community management.
Yeah.
That's a big one. I don't think we have a job description out for that one, but there is a general sort of application that I would like to see filled for community management. The marketing is a good one. We are looking for, did you mention the chain whip node one? I forget.
No.
Okay. We are looking for somebody to sit on the chain whip node stuff and optimize our network processes. We have a few gossip protocols that need optimizing and some things that need ownership. So if you are a particularly interesting network engineer, feel free to apply. I believe we have that one out. Other than that, no. You covered the rest.
All right. Just going through the questions that I see, or I guess there's a question here about what's going on with CADEX and this fake DEX dispute. You guys have any what's going on? One is saying the idea is stolen from the other, something about copyright issues. I guess what I'd say here is that, we have purview over Kadena and Kadena Eco respectively. And while we try to keep our finger on the pulse and follow what's happening in community, especially with important projects, we're definitely not the arbiters of truth or the source of authority about information here. So I would sort of defer to the respective projects for information here. As I certainly don't personally have any real inside information that can share or shed light on it, nor do we want to sort of be the mouthpiece, the centralized mouthpiece that is sharing information and news exclusively about projects. So good question. Want to make sure we address it, but I don't know that there's much we have to weigh in on.
Yeah, I don't think that we have too much to weigh in on. We don't run it. So I've heard some rumblings about things. That's about it.
I can say something, not about this specifically, but I can say that this is a distraction, and you guys are getting very into the distraction, and there's a bunch of cool stuff that can be built while you guys are focusing in on this distraction. And I would rather see things built than people talking about distraction.
Copyright. Yeah, come on, guys. It's copyright. But yeah, no, that's a good point, because I forget this, that like people aren't used to when you're doing big things like this, there are always distractions, and This is one of those ones. Yeah.
Look, if somebody has a trademark dispute, they can settle it. It will be settled in court. There will be a winner. Then what? Then you still have to go out and do stuff. So you might as well just skip that step and just let the courts decide whatever they want to decide. Yeah.
Speaking of builders, shout out for Koala Wallet. It's looking great, very user-friendly. Just give some positive feedback. Yeah, definitely. Koala Wallet's freaking awesome. If you haven't checked it out on the mobile app stores, definitely definitely take a look. Pretty cool. A lot of love for Koala Wallet. Super cool.
Yep.
Dear guys, from Reka Volga Ya, can you share a plan on how to reach institutional adoption?
No, but we have one, and we just haven't rolled the whole thing out yet. Overall, I don't think that going directly with a cryptocurrency to get industrial adoption is the way to do it. I think that the 2008, kind of 2016 to 2018 kind of cohort of layer ones who've been trying this, that we've all basically demonstrated that that doesn't really work. And when there's a boom time, it's easy to get the research money to do some POCs. But then after that, the stuff really doesn't take off too much. We have another idea for how to get into it, but right now we're much more focused on just public and DeFi and NFTs and developer experience and just kind of just foundational public crypto stuff as opposed to focusing on institutional. The other side note on this is that IBM in 2018 with Hyperledger basically came and forced all of the major corporates to try to adopt Hyperledger Fabric. And it was such a hot flaming pile of garbage that pretty much all of the C-suites and also kind of all of their VPs have gotten scared off from blockchain. IBM poisoned the well so badly with the hot garbage that they forced down everyone's throat that it's they definitely pushed back industrial adoption by 5 years. And I hope that with our strategy we can make it only 5 or 6 years and not 10 or 15 years, because man, it's just basically everyone who tried to use Fabric just has massive egg on their face, and they were the ones who were trying to push blockchain. So it's a combination of a few different factors. But yes, we do have a plan. No, we haven't rolled out what we're doing with Pact yet, but that is a big part of it, of the long-term strategy of how do we actually get to industrial without having to go to a major corporate and then go to Caterpillar and say, hey, use our blockchain. They'd be like, no, we used Fabric and it didn't work. And also why? It's no, we'll have other answers first, and then later on we can be, by the way, we also have a blockchain that you can actually start to use for payments. I think that strategy is much more appealing than what everyone's been trying to do for the last 6 to 8 years. You're on mute.
Thank you. Question from Fluxy. I noticed millions in selling pressure from PSC accounts from Genesis. This has led to poor price performance. Why are funds being mixed across accounts and chains when the purpose is to sell? So I'll first say that in general, we have to be very careful not to talk about price. So we can't comment on price directly. And I think also in general, because any account sales that relate to Kadena and Kadena Eco have potential to impact markets, there tends to be that tends to be kept close to the chest in order to avoid signaling one way or the other, and in order to make sure that we can make the most of platform share and use that in a way that benefits entire Kadena ecosystem. I've said this before on the live stream that we very much think about, at least on the grant and the eco side of things, about return on investment and how do we grow the pie, how do we grow the ecosystem for everyone, and so that's the mentality bring there. So I'll leave it to Will or Emily if they want to comment any further. Otherwise, we can go on to the next question.
I mean, you already got the core of it of this stuff is just delicate, so we just don't comment on it publicly. I mean, I will say that overall, Kadena has been tracking alts, relatively speaking, well, and just right now the entire market is macro dominated because we're still in this recession. I have hopes that the crypto winter ends and that the recession, ends this year, and then we can get back to not being in a crypto winter. But most of the stuff I just track it relative to the rest of the market, and performance isn't that bad compared to everything else.
Yep. All right, we got another favorite question. When ledger support?
We got a question. We got some response from them. I think they wanted us to go to an auditing firm or something for it. Emily, do you know about it?
I don't have visibility into what's going on with it specifically on the day-to-day. I just get the updates from various folks in the org. I heard they did contact us and they kicked it down the road, but they did call us back, so that's nice.
Which is huge progress because it's very hard to get in touch with them. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's still going on. If they want something else, we'll do it, and we'll get that support.
I think one thing to
We'll get it
follow up
one
on
way or
maybe for the next one is we should figure out if you can just install it in dev mode into the ledger, because that's a pretty normal way for ledger integration to happen early on. I think that if you turn on development mode, you can just install it into ledger now. Although I don't know if we published it, but I think we have. So we should at least check and follow up on it. I don't know off the top of my head, and I don't want to go and search our GitHubs to double check on the live stream.
Sounds good. So I will add a follow-up to earlier topic around the job conversation that all open positions can be found at the following link here. And so please check that out. And since we mentioned community management, I know that many here on this live stream might be suitable for a position like that, for example. And so definitely check out open positions there, and especially given the conversation around some of the key hiring needs. Should be a great opportunity. All right. Question from Loyal Excel. Does Kadena code / build anything in private, or is everything public on GitHub?
No. I mean, we totally build stuff in private from time to time. I mean,
we have tons of private repos. Yeah.
Yeah, they're usually just sketches, and then when things are ready to actually publish, we push it out to the public GitHub. Yeah.
To add color, we are working on making more things public that needn't to be private. But there are still a few projects in there, like the Pact LSP, which is currently private. For some reason, I need to talk to somebody about making that public. We do work constantly. It's not just what's reflected in the public repos. Actually, maybe like half of the stuff that we're working on is in the public repos.
Yeah.
All right. We have a question directed towards Will. Could you please touch up on Kadena's modular approach / store? I'm not quite sure what they mean by modular approach, but yeah, if that makes sense to you, or if you want to just...
I think Stuart teased this in a previous interview. And I kind of want to let him come on to one of these and actually roll it out, because this is much closer to being his baby than mine. But yeah, I'm going to say I could, but I'm not, because I don't want to steal Stu's thunder. I think he's going to do a better job of it than I will on this.
Sounds great. And of course, with any ask me anything type of situation, folks are welcome to ask, and we'll make sure that the question is heard, and there isn't always a timely answer. But such is life. Okay, let's see here. We got a question from KDB. Can you put some words in for how Kadena stand / will stand in the future when regulations come?
No, but we don't comment on regulation, and that's been like that forever. Sorry. I really wish I could. I'm like one of the fucking world experts on this, but I can't, so I'm sorry. I really am. There's so much to say on this topic. It's not even funny, but no.
All right. Let's see here. We have a more technical question from JC. Is it possible to reinforce multiple smaller servers for the nodes? And what's the plan to update or fix the mempool regarding optimizing its process?
This is not my area of expertise. Emily, you got this one?
Let me read the question. Hang on. Is it possible to reinforce? What's the plan to update fix the mempool regarding optimizing its process? Okay, so the main problem with mempool is the fact that the Gossip protocol is suboptimal. We do something like replace by fee, and we've made some changes to it that are coming down the pipeline that are going to sort of optimize a lot of the way that it validates. So it's not doing so many hops in order to validate individual transactions. But for the most part, it's going to take a sort of deep audit on our part and figure out, it's a code problem, basically, at the end of the day. Is there something that we can do to optimize the algorithm or, improve the asymptotics in some way? And I think there are some things. We just haven't had enough manpower to cover the mempool. And the mempool's been working, basically autonomously for the last 4 years. We're currently hiring to fill that role because we do have the space and the bandwidth now to dedicate some of our time and energy to optimizing the mempool. But it's going to take, I think, a new person to get that done.
I definitely
is-
say it's been impressive, like how well our homebrew mempool is done.
Yeah.
Because none of the mempools off the shelf at the time worked, and now there might be some libraries that work. But
Yeah.
back then, like when we launched, they definitely weren't. And hopefully, we can get that person in.
Yeah, and I think we have a few candidates in the pipeline already, which actually I need to talk to Will about when we're done with this. There's various things we can do. There's tons of different kinds of improvements that we can make to this, and we just need to decide which ones are going to be most appropriate for the future, and sort of as we, come. Basically, we have to figure this out after I think New Pact comes in, because New Pact coming in allows us to establish different kinds of mempools. So, for instance, doing like good dependency management queries and figuring out sort of like who's a child of whom, and structuring blocks on that basis. I mean, that might be in our future. So, I think we're probably going to address this when a new person is on and we have New Pact in play.
All right. Let's see here. This is a spicy one. Will Kadena ever go to proof of stake from Jeepman LS1?
I want to say no. The reason we're proof of work is that we figured out how to horizontally scale a decentralized, cryptocurrency, and I don't know of a solution by which you can actually horizontally scale with proof of stake. That being said, I don't know of anyone who has formally proven, which would be my requirement to say definitely not, that we would never go to it, that they've formally proven that you can't horizontally scale a proof of stake network. Is my very strong belief. I've run through this with, I don't even know how many of the consensus experts in crypto over the past like 6 or 7 years, of kind of the logic of like why you can't actually horizontally scale something without using the asynchronicity that is proof of work to be able to do it. But I mean, most of the people who are built most of the consensus protocols from most of I'd say the top, I would say at least the top of the newer top 100 currencies at the time. I've talked with them at some point about how ours works and how theirs works, and why horizontal scaling I think only works proof of work. But I don't know even if it's possible to formally prove that you can not do what we're doing with Chainweb with a proof of stake network. It's just that the logic is pretty hard to argue with. So the answer is 99% no, but the scientist in me is saying until it's actually proven that you can't, I can't say that we would never, because going to proof of stake could get a lot of performance. Not a lot of performance, but just lower latencies. The problem is that I just don't see it happening. I care more about being able to horizontally scale a network and be able to deal with capacity as the community grows and as more dApps come online, and have these core primitives for being able to do multi-threaded dApp development, which is what you have with Chainweb, than I do about other parts. Because going to proof of stake, you get a finite performance bump up front, and then after that, the problem is that you can't scale it afterwards. And so the answer is probably no, pretty much never. But I'm always looking for hey, is there some new technique that could allow us to mostly just from also just a threat analysis point of view, if someone can actually if someone can actually figure out how to do Chainweb but proof of stake, then I want to be the first one to know, because we could have a competitor that's very serious that comes down the line if they could figure out how to use what we've done with Chainweb and actually apply it to proof of stake. But I'm pretty sure that you can't. So I'm quite sure that the answer is no.
Yeah, I think that asynchronous primitives is sort of an interesting observation. If you've done any Python programming or JavaScript programming, other languages that have async as a keyword, there's something that is that it's quite difficult to take some synchronous code and use it in an asynchronous world. And so I think it's also an interesting observation to say that, hey, mining is sort of intrinsically asynchronous. And so from that primitive, it's easier to build out and parallelize things. And that's sort of an old story in computer science, that asynchronous primitives make it easy to build out code that runs in parallel. And code that's sequential and blocking makes it harder to build out things that are in parallel. So yeah, I think that's actually maybe an interesting approach for anyone that wants to dive in more formally in terms of logic. I'd be curious, but
that's the core of the scaling issue with proof of stake, is that you have one kind of master ledger. Even if you shard it, you just have this one master ledger. So if things are interactive, basically it's a small world problem that in practice, like, two people or even two programs on a blockchain, by 5 or 6 transactions are going to be causally connected, which means that if you have something like a DAG, which allows you to get some extra throughput, you can't actually get 1,000 transactions in practice running in parallel, because most of the transactions that are going on are through 5 or 6 links related to some other transactions. So they need to be causally ordered. Thus, that means that your pipe, when you're actually under load, is only going to be 6 or 7 transactions in parallel large. And this is why we went with Chainweb, because it's much closer to multi-core CPUs, which are difficult to program, but you have the primitives, and then over time, the communities and the developers who are working on this figure out easier primitives, easier kind of libraries that operate on top of these primitives to be able to do multi-threaded development. It's just that we're talking about a blockchain now, and it's still early days for figuring out, okay, how do you scale a DEX across 100 chains or 10 chains even, figuring out how to do that. There's so many different approaches. It's going to be very interesting as we expand into that.
All right, another interesting question from Michaela Lopez. Why does Kadena not have a halving of the mining rewards? Normally, I would snarkily respond because that's not how the smart contract was written. But since
because we're not Bitcoin, that's why.
Yeah, having so back when we designed the token economic schedule, halving was considered this massive risk. Like, some people, like the Bitcoin, some of the core Bitcoin people were just like, oh, this is artificial scarcity, which is really good. But the other half of the people were just like, actually, the vast majority were just, this introduces large instabilities into the network at these preset times. And as Bitcoin has matured, it's become less of a risk. That being said, I like things that change on a more gentle cycle. So we don't have halving. We just have, because Bitcoin has just an exponential decay function, just like we do. It's just that theirs is every few years that they adjust to the new amount, whereas ours adjusts, I think it's about every month. So we have halving-ish, but it's not halving like it drops in half. It just drops by the amount that for a given period of time it should, to mirror what the exponential decay function that we picked out would be. So
right.
Yeah.
We have less. We have a small step function. They have a big step function. That's about it.
I think people focus too much on it because it's just such a big event in Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is just worth so much money at this point that it moves markets, but it also adds this instability that if things had gone differently, Bitcoin might have been really damaged by it. It's just that it wasn't. And then you have Ethereum. I don't even know what Ethereum's thing is. I think they just kind of continuously mine at this point.
Right.
Dude, my Discord has been logging me out every 5 minutes, and I still haven't gotten it to work on my freaking phone. I don't know what's going on. Two-factor auth has totally failed on it. I have to use all the backup codes.
You have to uninstall.
I don't even know, man.
Sometimes it freezes up. You have to uninstall it and then reinstall.
I can't even run it on SteamYard. When we're doing these casts, last time we were doing the cast, my video was going in and out, and it was Discord that was eating up all of my CPU. It wasn't doing anything. It was just hanging out there, attempting to latch onto StreamYard and be like, "Oh, you're live streaming. Let me live stream you on Discord." And my computer just kept saying no, and it just went into this infinite loop. So
maybe it's punishing you for being in all those sketchy Discord servers.
It's better than Telegram, but no, I need to fix my freaking Discord. I don't know what's going on with it. Yeah, this is definitely a this month problem. I mean, I haven't been on Discord too much in January, but February I've been trying to log in. It just keeps locking me out, so I don't get the notifications.
Yeah, KDB, I don't know if you're also asking about the general chat channel, but if you want to repost the questions there, happy to answer them. In the meantime, we'll move on to more interesting one. Actually, KDB, we'll honor you with this one, I guess. Hey, Will, since we haven't had you on the stream in a little while, for those that are maybe newer to the Kadena ecosystem or new members of the Kadena army, could you just briefly describe a little bit about your background and how you came to start Kadena?
I mean, I was going to start saying that I am adult male human, age 35, but yeah. No, I mean, background, where to start my background? I guess we'll start technical background. I started working in, I don't know. So I published papers in a few different domains. The first one was in material science. I was in a lab back in freaking high school, and it's kind of a fun story, so I guess I should just tell it. And it was like, my junior year internship before I was going to apply for college. And they were working on ionic liquids. So, NaCl, so like table salts, cation, and they're little, and the energy required to turn them into a liquid is quite high. So they're liquid at high temperatures. But it turns out that if you replace one of the ions with a really big ion, that is just, this one's positive, this one's negative, or the other way around, that what's called the lattice energy is quite different, and you can have salts that are liquid at room temperature. These were used for ion engine propulsion, or like they were being researched for ion engine propulsion back in the day, because you can take, the big positive or the big negative, throw it at the back of the satellite, and you have the majority of the energy going into the majority of the mass that's from the fuel, and that's providing thrust for the thing. So I was working on that, and I was like doing very basic science research, and the professor came to invite me to lunch for the first time, and me being 17 and being like, oh my God, you're the professor and you're inviting me to lunch. I didn't crash my experiment like I was supposed to, and I was mid-experiment, and I came back and the numbers had changed. So then I investigated that more, and it turned out that everyone had been measuring the surface tension and a few other things incorrectly, because these ionic liquids are just absorbing water out of the air really quickly. But also because they're so viscous, all the water ends up being right on the top. So you're actually changing the meniscus when you're trying to measure the viscosity, the surface tension of this thing. And I ended up publishing a paper on that. Then got into fractal geometry, published a bunch of papers there. That's probably where a lot of my background in distributed systems and thinking came from, because those are kind of complex interacting systems, and it made it easier for me to think about distributed systems when, after I graduated, moved to eventually was at the SEC, helped to build their crypto team. I was also building their high frequency trading analytics lab, so built their computing cluster, which is still running, and that team's like 50, 60, 70 people. And when I was there, started the cryptocurrency, or I was one of the founding members of the cryptocurrency working group. Valerie still runs it, and she was a founder of it. But I was brought in as the tech lead because I didn't own any coin, and I had the clearance required, and I had the technical knowledge required. So worked that for about a year-ish. Left, went to hacker school to go learn Haskell, because I've been wanting to learn it forever, and I wasn't able to learn it kind of piecemeal nights and weekends. So I needed to kind of dedicate 2.5 solid months to just kind of sitting down and learning it, which was great. And then ended up at JP Morgan, met Stu. We did their cryptocurrency group, left, founded Kadena, is kind of like the quick story. So what else? I don't know.
Awesome. I think we are getting towards the end of our campfire here, but since we have Will in the stream, maybe we'll follow up here, because I think this has been pretty interesting for a community here. Will, curious what advice you can give young people who want to become successful. What tips / advice would you have in general?
I mean, it depends. In general, something that I've always followed is, especially when I was younger and earlier in my career, was find people that you feel stupid around and then try to be helpful to them. And then eventually you just learn more. And then once you kind of feel like you're doing well in that situation, find the next group that makes you feel stupid, and then do it again and again and again. And then after a period of time, you're either going to get tired of it, or you'll be doing well. I mean, it's kind of stay engaged and stay interested. Outside of that, I don't know. One of the things I always worry about is falling into the expert beginner trap, this is more of a developer centric mantra, but you kind of as your progression as a developer, it can be quite easy to kind of hit you have the novice stage, then you have the beginner stage. And then as you're going to try to jump to intermediate, some people break off and go to expert beginner, where they think that they know everything. Whereas in reality, you really don't know anything. And to progress, you need to understand that you don't know much and there's still a lot to learn. So being wary of kind of setting up into that, where it's I'm an expert in my domain. It's you're probably not. There's always more to learn. It's kind of with the proof of stake question, where I don't know the answer to this thing, so I can't give a super solid answer. And being able to honestly reflect on the fact that you don't quite know, I don't know what the answer is it's a good feeling, even though it can be it can kind of eat at your self-esteem sometimes when you realize how much more there is to learn. So I guess that sort of works.
Well, I think that's a lovely note to end on. That just continuing to learn is
Yeah.
probably the best thing that one can do to be successful. And certainly you'll be successful at acquiring more knowledge and information and wisdom. And I think that story, Will, was very interesting to all of us here and resonated. So thank you so much for sharing. And Emily, of course, always a delight to have you on here. This has been a really fun campfire. So thanks again to the community for being here and being present and showing up and interacting. That makes it so much more fun for us when we have all these live questions and discussions. We almost never are able to get to every single question. I tried to make sure that we hit all the questions, just so that everyone knows that we're listening, we're hearing. And I hope that that was useful, informative community, and that you'll tune in again next time and continue with the great suggestions and help. Kadena Army, you are the life here of our ability to execute and ability to build and grow. So stay strong and please keep tuning in. We appreciate you all. Be well.
Yes. Thank you.